Welcome back to part 2 of A Leader's Guide to Addressing Suicide. We'll begin with the question, do you have an effective model of understanding personal identity and the various aspects of our life that might shake our concept of who we are as an individual? Do you understand how threats to personal identity might translate into thoughts of suicide? Stay with us, for that's what we'll be discussing on this episode of the Evolving Warfighter. Welcome to the Evolving Warfighter. My name is Dr. Franklin Annis, and we're going to begin this episode with a simple exercise. I want you to think about where you want to be in life 1 year from now. Now, how about 5 years from now? 10 years from now? 20 years from now? I'm going to wager a guess that a lot of you thought about information that concerned various different aspects of your life to include what employment you had. Were you able to get your dream job, or were you able to advance in the ranks of the job that you have now? A lot of it had to do with your finances. Were you able to gain additional resources and wealth to do the things that you wanted to do? And finally, and probably most importantly, is did you grow in your close personal relationships? Today I'm going to present a model for you to understand how different aspects of our lives can impact our concept of our personal identity. When our personal identity is threatened, especially how we see ourselves in the present and how we see our future or hopes for the future are threatened, this can often translate into thoughts of suicide, mainly because the individual becomes so lost that they cannot picture at the moment a different vision for the future. I developed this model over the course of several years, combining it with other elements that I found while studying this topic. This model makes the most sense to me. Not only do I understand why an individual may want to commit suicide when their personal identity is threatened, I feel that this model is useful in terms of predicting who might be at risk for suicide. The model is relatively simple. Imagine a house. This house has a roof, and in the model, the roof represents the concept of personal identity. When the roof shakes, so is the concept of an individual's identity shaken. When the roof collapses, so does the personal identity collapse. The roof is held up by 3 pillars: close personal relationships, employment, and finances. Close personal relationships represent your closest relationship. This is typically thought of your relationship with your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, spouse, or significant other. In some cases, it may represent your relationship with children. The next pillar, employment, is pretty self-explanatory. Do you have a job? Do you find the job meaningful? Does the job meet your needs? Financial pillar. This pillar represents having the resources to meet your basic needs and explore some of your hobbies and desires. Basically, it represents economic freedom to do the things that you wish to do. The house itself is built on a legal foundation, meaning are you in good legal standing in your community? There's nothing that will shake all 3 pillars of this model faster than getting in trouble with the law. It should be fairly self-evident that going to prison or jail will remove you from all 3 of these pillars: your close personal relationships, your employer, and your financial resources. In my experience, individuals can handle a high degree of chaos in any individual pillar of this model. It's the assumption that the roof, or the concept of personal identity, can be held up by the other 2. I'll give you an example of this. Imagine a husband that loses his job. While it would be traumatic, and there is stress involved in that situation, if he still has a loving spouse, and he still has resources to pay the rent and pay the food, he will eventually find another job. His thoughts don't immediately turn to suicide. I find that individuals become most prone to suicidal thoughts when more than one pillar at a time are impacted. A great example of this is the topic of divorce. It removes an individual from a once loving spouse. It threatens their financial resources as it's divided by 2, and lawyers consume a large amount of this economic resources. And the bleed over and stress of this situation can impact an individual's employer or employability during this period. In a recent review of Army suicides, the Army found that 75% of the suicidal cases were having problems in their close personal relationships. 42% were having problems in their finances, and 50% were facing some type of charge under UCMJ, giving some credence to this model. I hope you enjoyed this video and found this model useful. I also hope that as a good leader you're identifying soldiers inside your formations that might be having problems with these areas of their life and providing support and resources to get those soldiers help before they turn to thoughts of suicide. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Evolving Warfighter. We'll discuss how values impact personal identity, specifically how violating one of those values or causing a moral injury might impact your soldiers, along with additional conflicts caused by cognitive dissonance. As always, I invite you to subscribe to the Evolving Warfighter for more videos on this topic and topics on military self-development. Again, I will leave you here with a playlist of resources I think are helpful to military leaders on the topic of suicide. I'll post all future videos in this series to this playlist. Until we meet next time, stay focused on your self-development so we can ensure that we can dominate the modern battlefield.